It's only 5 days until the preseason opener with the Jets at MetLife Stadium. And this is the Giants training camp report presented by Investors Bank. Hi again, everybody. I'm Paul Dottino. He's two-time Super Bowl champion David Diehl. So glad you could join us for another inside look at Giants practice. And boy, there was big news today. Saquon Barkley and Oshane Ximines coming off of the PUP list. They'll be able to practice for the first time this summer.
Very exciting time for Giants fans. Everybody was expecting, and there was the announcement that it may happen this week. It happened today, and Giants fans should be very excited about Saquon coming back into the mix with Kadarius Toney, Kenny Golladay on the outside. This could be the makings of an explosive offense, barring that this offensive line continues to gel together.
Let's talk about Barkley for just a second. Joe Judge has said they're going to be ultra careful with him. The medics will tell them exactly what he's allowed to do, step by step, day by day. Coach Judge has already said he will not play against the Jets, but if medically cleared at some point during the preseason, he could get into a game.
No question about it. This is a player that you know that is itching to get back out on the field, but it's all about being smart. Let's face it, this is a different season and a unique schedule, being 17 games. I know people may say, well, you took out one preseason game. Saquon Barkley wasn't going to get carries during the preseason games, regardless of as you continue to ramp up. So for Saquon to continue to build that confidence and that mental toughness that's needed to push through this injury is something that's going to bode well for him once the season starts.
Barkley tore his ACL in Chicago last September 20th, had surgery on October 30th, and has been rehabbing here at the facility on almost a daily basis. When you watch him, David, from a football player's perspective, what kinds of movements are you looking to see?
Well, obviously, everybody's looking at how big and explosive his legs look after doing all the rehab that he's had this offseason. But I think it's all about the starting, getting in and out of your cuts, and being able to plant your foot and get north and south with that immediate reaction without having any doubt about what your body's capable of doing. So those are all the things that they're going to continue to build and grow with Saquon, and it's going to be that confidence in himself. The mental aspect is the biggest part of coming back from an injury. We know physically that he's up to the table and he's up to those standards, but mentally, can you push yourself to that next level and turn that next gear that we've seen Saquon Barkley have?
Now, one of the things that trainers will do over the course of time is monitor him with all kinds of electronic devices. David, we know how technology has actually infiltrated the NFL. They'll check into all that stuff before he goes to the next step.
No question. Obviously, this is something that Ronnie Barnes and the medical staff have their full hands on, and they're taking that warrior mentality out of a player that, as we said, we know he's dying to get back onto the field.
Oshane Ximines had a shoulder injury that was suffered against the Rams back on October the 4th. Then he had rotator cuff surgery on November 30th. And now this edge rusher is in one heck of a battle because the Giants' depth chart at that position is deep.
Yeah, nobody's going to be guaranteed any spots, especially when we're talking about those edge rushers and outside linebackers. This is an area that we know that the Giants have to continue to improve, but more importantly, get that productivity out of. We know with Dexter Lawrence on the inside, with Leonard Williams, they're going to be able to push the A and B gaps and be able to separate. But who's going to be able to bend that edge? Who's going to be able to run the hoop and really get those not only clear sacks, but hopefully those forced fumbles that you can get at that position?
Coach Judge says that Ximines is a power and speed pass rusher. We do know that as a rookie, he had 4.5 sacks a couple of years ago. And so the Giants are really hoping he can help re-energize that pass rush as we get a look at some of the linemen as well here on offense. And that's something you know a lot about. David, I wonder, what do you think is going to be the hardest thing for Ximines to shake off in terms of rust as he tries to get back into the flow?
Well, obviously, one thing is conditioning. There's one thing about being in shape, and there's a whole nother thing about being football shape. We're using every ounce and every muscle of your body in every pass rush move and run blocking move. But the next thing is the crispness of your second moves and having a backup move. We know that a lot of players early on come in, they're one-trick ponies. Being able to combat that first move and have a secondary move lined up and being able to win that rush, that's the area that needs to improve.
Now we're getting a look at a continuity drill here with the Giants offensive line. And there's your old offensive line coach, Pat Flaherty.
Love to see it.
As a consultant here this year. Basically, he's like the third guy working with the O-line behind Coach Wilkerson and, of course, offensive line coach, the head offensive line coach, Rob Sale.
It's a great thing that there's three bodies between Coach Sale, Coach Wilkerson, and Coach Flaherty, because each player is getting individual techniques and fundamentals in the coaching they need in every single period. And there's not any downtime. They're constantly walking through footwork, talking through the techniques that need to be successful at that position. So the fact that they have 3 to focus on that group and together as a whole is only going to be able to make them get better and make them take that next step even closer.
What is Coach Flats asking from these guys to do on this particular drill?
Right now, you're making sure that you're working the mesh, the fit, and the communication between the zone blocking scheme between the center, the left guard, and left tackle. So if there's an inside move by a defensive tackle, whether there's a stalemate at the double team working up at the second level between the center and guard, it's all about working that zone cohesion and that zone scheme. So you're taking the same footwork, but your eyes are looking at the same thing at the same time.
Coach Judge is often stress conditioning. As we get a look at Daniel Jones, we'll get some passing drills here now. When you played, and it was only a few years ago that you were still in pads and helmets, what kind of different conditioning drills did you do that are maybe different from what these guys are doing today as they come to camp?
Well, I think one of the things that you do is you work a drive block ladder. You drive a defender 10 yards, you take a breath, you drive them another 10 yards. That's building that conditioning that you have, especially in the run game. And then when you start doing that and get your conditioning built up that way to where you're having those long sustaining drives and you're having the play clock and the time to rest in between, that's what allows you really to get your wind and your conditioning, because fatigue makes cowards of us all. In the fourth quarter, if you're a big guy and you're huffing and puffing, the other opponent will get the edge on you.
So you see a lot of similarities in these drills that what you did when you were playing.
Absolutely. You continue to build and hone in on those individual skills and techniques, because once you get to the regular season, you won't have individual periods like this. You're breaking down the opposing defensive line, what type of schemes that they're going to run, and it doesn't allow you to have that individual time like they're getting with their 3 offensive line coaches.
We get a look at the quarterbacks, Clayton Thorson, number 17, of course, and Mike Glennon, number 2. Daniel Jones, though, I want to bring up a point here. Daniel Jones was in Carolina. He was also in Arizona during the offseason, doing some throwing sessions with his wide receivers. We have been told by Nick Gates that a number of the offensive linemen went to attend those sessions, and even though they didn't do anything practice-wise, they wanted to be there with their teammates to establish further camaraderie. I know that's music to your ears.
Without a doubt, and that's one thing that a lot of people, I think, fail to recognize or realize, that when I was a left tackle, I'd have to pay attention to some of the combinations. If the tight end is running a wide stick or the wide receiver playing the slot is running a quick slant, I know that on my first punch, I'm going to have to snatch and get that defensive end's hands down so he can't get a pass defense or possibly a tip pick and an interception on the defensive side of the ball. Those are all things that you're continuing to work with the timing, not only with your protections, but the way that the quarterback's going to deliver the football as well. So having that support, being able to go out there, see the timing, seeing the reaction, and how you're going to be able to set up your 3, your 5, or your 7-step drop compared to that with your pass set, those are all things that, once again, make this transition into training camp, into preseason games, that much easier.
So all these little things that these offensive linemen picked up by watching Jones throwing to his receivers will all accelerate the process. But I also wonder, what does it say about their respect for Daniel Jones as a leader in only his 3rd NFL season?
It says a lot that from day one they've had his back, and it continues to get bigger and stronger and better. And the one thing you love about Daniel Jones, which he had almost like Eli had, he only speaks when he needs to speak. You can't fake those emotions. You can't be a big rah-rah guy if that's not who you are. But when you speak with conviction and when you do speak up, everybody follows and everybody listens because they know it comes from the heart. It's no different now than when you're talking about the offensive line, the offense in this football team. They're going to follow Daniel Jones based upon his preparation, his work, and the character that he has.
There'll be a fully padded practice tomorrow and on Wednesday at the Giants Fan Fest at MetLife Stadium, going into Saturday's preseason opener with the Jets. But, David, one of the things that we have noticed is that there's almost a daily churn at the bottom of the roster where the Giants are bringing in guys to try out, and it turns out they're subbing out guys on the bottom. And I think that's really interesting because it keeps every one of these players on their toes.
Well, this is something that I expected. You remember me talking about this last offseason, that this was going to be the most competitive training camp for a player to make than ever before. You're dealing with opt-outs. You're dealing with 2020 draft picks. You're dealing with 2020 free agents. You're dealing with the 2021 draft class. You're dealing with the 2021 free agents. So when you go into a preseason game, you'd be like, okay, you're not only competing against the guys on your team, you're competing up against the 31 other teams that are going to be breaking down that film. Now it's with practice so that there is no guarantee that you're going to be here tomorrow. So practice like you play and what you want to perform on that game level, because there's no telling that you're going to be back here tomorrow. They're going to continue to evolve and churn this roster out, knowing that they're going to have to go from 90 to 85 after this Jets game, and it's going to have to continue to dwindle down as they get ready to have those competitive joint practices in Cleveland.
We should tell people that this year's cut-down days are different than they have been in the past.
Yep.
You mentioned 90 to 85 on August 17th, 85 to 80 on August 24th. That would be after the Cleveland game, preseason game number 2, and then down to 53 after the Patriots game and the preseason finale. That cut down is August 31st. So it's a heck of a lot different than it was in years past.
No question. It's a heck of a lot different, a lot earlier, so that you know the template of your football team. And I think it's even going to get even bigger of a transition towards those bottom echelon players that are looking to be special teams player or backups. Because right before that start of the regular season, we know that there's going to be a lot of free agents and veteran free agents that are going to be available. It just depends on what team, if they're going to sign them week 1, that's going to make them a veteran and guarantee their contract for the year, or are you going to be waiting for a week 2 signing?
I know training camp isn't quite as difficult as it was when you were in uniform, David, but at what point are these players starting to itch for that first preseason game to hit another body on another jersey with another helmet?
I mean, you already are starting to get that itch. You're so not happy when you come out here and you run a blitz period and the defensive tackles are running, hey, watch the screen, and they're card reading. But those are all things that make you better as a group. When your defense can identify what you're doing and you can still be successful at it, that's what bodes that confidence that you have during the regular season. Because there's times that you have that. Whether it's a 4-minute drive, whether you're getting down towards the short yardage or goal line, you know you're running it. They know you're running it. It's about the team that's going to go out and perform and man up when that time comes.
Now, we know from Coach Judge that in this Jets game coming up, a lot of the young players are going to get a lot of reps. But as you watch these last couple of padded practices going into that game, what do you specifically want to see from some of the young guys who are competing for spots on that depth chart? Because we think we know who's in the lead for the starting 5.
Well, obviously, number 1 is confidence in the game plan and the playbook. Listen, you know going into this Jets game, it's not going to be expanded. Understand the fundamentals and the keys to what the game plan is expecting you to do. Number 2, clean football. No penalties, no drop balls, the things that you can control, the things that make a difference between winning and losing football games. Those are the 2 biggest things I'm looking out of these young
We're
players.
getting a look here at the releases between the wide receivers and the defensive backs. And boy, the Giants secondary has got to be going into this season probably one of the top 5 in the NFL on paper. There is so much talent out here. We have seen 6th-round draft pick Rodarius Williams absolutely star out over the course of the last several practices. The Giants must feel really good about these guys.
No doubt about it. They've completely helped and upgraded that position to where we were talking about last year due to the injuries and due to opt-outs and Xavier McKinney going out, not being able to play as much man as you want and having to be able to play more zone and have those type of abilities. Now, with the way that this Giants defense is set up, especially at the safety position and at those corners and at those nickel slot positions, you have a Rolodex of what you're going to be able to show pre-snap compared to post-snap, how you're going to be able to bracket coverage, especially when you're facing elite receivers like we are this year in the AFC West or the NFC South. So being able to match up that way and have that continuity between your coverage and your pass rush, they always say, what's your best pass rush or coverage? What's your best coverage? A pass rush. So once they get those 2 things working hand on hand this season and everybody understands what the keys of it are, that's where you're really going to see this defense ascend.
As we see, that's David Sills, number 84, one of the wide receivers who has had a really good training camp once again. Remember, he had a broken foot last year. And Coach Judge admitted that Sills had a good training camp up to that point, and he certainly had put himself into the mix.
No question about it. That's one of the things that you love is the competition at that group. Who's going to be that emerging guy, whether it's him or John Ross or some of the backup players as well.
Even Pettis.
Even Pettis is another one that got here last year that had more reps and opportunities. That's where it's exciting to see these guys fighting at the bottom of this roster to work their way up and to be a member of that 53-man roster. As we've seen last year, It's one play away from your number getting called and you being bounced back up, and you better be able to perform and capitalize on that opportunity. Opportunities are never lost. Someone's going to take the one you miss.
We just saw C.J. Board, number 18, moments ago, another guy who has done some good things on special teams. And I think that's the problem that the Giants are going to have as they try to figure out who they want to keep. They've got a lot of wide receivers who they like. They've got a lot of defensive backs who they like. And ultimately, they may be in competition with each other, not at their own positions, but for a special teams job.
And that's the exact problem that you want to have on your roster is you've got more than one player competing for one spot. And then it comes down to who could be a jack of all trades and be a backup as well as a contributor on special teams as well. So that's the exact position that we want this Giants roster to be in.
You know, when Patrick Graham, the defensive coordinator, deploys his secondary on a week-by-week basis, we don't know this yet, but we expect that he's going to do a lot of mixing and matching depending upon the opponent, not just scheme-wise, but maybe even personnel-wise, because he has so many guys who can play so many different positions.
Yeah, based upon what receivers you're playing. Are they the bigger bodies, the ones that are going to have the big catch radius and are going to be almost like power forwards and have to go up and win the 50-50 balls? Are they the elusive, the slot guys, the smaller guys that are all looking to stretch the field vertically and get over the top in order to open up the run game? Those are all things that now with this secondary, you're going to have movable pieces that you can have those key matchups where you're facing one-on-ones that are strengths to your defense.
And on the other side, when we talk about the Giants wide receivers, similar situation. You've got a guy like Kadarius Toney who can do a lot of gadget stuff. You know, you've got Sterling Shepard, who is one of the more premier slot receivers in the National Football League. And then you got your guys on the outside in Slayton and Galladay. It gives the Giants coordinators on both sides of the ball so many options.
It most certainly does. It gives Daniel Jones a lot of options, and it helps the offensive line because when you guys have guys who can win right off of the line of scrimmage and win those battles, we've got Kadarius Toney and Sterling Shepard who could take a 5-yard slant, 30-plus yards. Those are the explosive plays that this Giants offense were lacking in 2020. That they're going to get back in 2021.
And we didn't even really talk about the fact we mentioned Pettis and Ross before. These guys are burners.
Yeah.
Pettis is certainly a guy you'd want to try on the outside. Ross is a guy you might want to try in the slot, but I could see formations where the Giants might use 2 slot guys, one guy on each side.
I know one of the main reasons why they could move to the inside is when you do have that speedy wide receiver, it takes a lot of the times the jam off of the line of scrimmage. So you can get a free release and manipulate openings into coverages.
All right, so as far as the physicality of what they're going to be doing, again, 2 padded practices now on Tuesday and Wednesday. Then they'll have that day off going into the Jets game because things will be lightened up on Thursday before they actually play the game on Saturday. Physically speaking, whereabouts are the players right now?
Right now, obviously, there's a little bit of soreness. You're still getting used to being in pads. And that's that callus that has to build up. It's something that you have as a football player.
So the heat rub is still coming out.
Without a doubt. The only time that you feel 100% is the day before training camp starts. You're going to be a little sore. You're going to be a little nicked up. But these are the things that you continue to fight through, battle through, do your rehab, get in the cold tubs from, because it's what's going to prepare you for a 17-week grind.
All right, let's take a look at the Giants' offensive set as Daniel Jones leads them up to the line of scrimmage. And the Giants are still doing some of their installs that they plan to use in that first game against the Jets.
Yeah, they're obviously working base runs, inside zone schemes, play action built off of it. Obviously, no thumping because they're not in full pads. They're just in shells.
Right.
You're trying to work your fits. You're trying to work your footwork up front. And then you're also, more importantly, trying to give that back a clean crease and an understanding of what it's going to look like when you're in full pads, moving them, getting them to the second level and taking care of the down man first.
You saw during that last play, number 48, Tate Crowder, getting some burn here at practice. This is a guy, Mr. Irrelevant last year. Last guy taken in the draft, made some big plays, had that fumble recovery for a touchdown against Washington, and he's trying to assert himself to get more playing time now.
And that's the great thing. Last year was such a valuable time for a lot of these young players, and it was trial by fire. They weren't expected to play immediately, but all of a sudden, when thrust into action because of injuries and needing to step up, that game opportunities and a game preparation they had last year is only going to let them build more confidence this year, understanding what the weeks of practice are going to be like, more importantly, what game day is like.
You got to look at Corey Clement, the former Philadelphia Eagle, who has been getting some burn in the backfield. Funny part about him, you know, he's been a really good special teamer for the Eagles for a few years, was on that Super Bowl team that they had. And Every time he touches the ball here, he seems to show a little extra energy. I think he is really excited about being a Giant.
No question. To see when he gets the ball in his hands, he's definitely shown he has the juice. And I think that's one exciting thing about looking at this Giants backfield is the fact that after Saquon Barkley, Devontae Booker, Alfred Morris,
an old guy like
Clement,
Alfred Morris
and
right
Alfred
there.
Morris right there. These are all guys that understand the ins and outs of what this zone blocking scheme, the power scheme brings, how to put themselves in the best position, but more importantly, not having a drop off like last year with Saquon being injured. It was almost like who's going to be able to have that next player step up that's going to be able to do multiple things instead of just being a one-trick pony. This backfield now has that ability.
We can look at Mike Glennon running this offensive set. I did not see who was in the backfield, but I did see Alfred Morris take the last handoff. We'll see if he's in there again because I do want to speak with him a second. There's Clement on the play-action pass and then the flick to the outside. But I tell you something about Alfred Morris. Last year, he impressed me.
Yep.
He ran hard between the tackles, grinded it out when the Giants needed them to grind it out. And then this year, even though he didn't get the call over the summer, a couple of weeks in, all of a sudden his phone rings, and he comes in here as fresh as a daisy trying to make this team.
No question about it. Runs with low pads, always has his shoulder pads over his knees, always leaning forward, always driving those legs. And you said it, those gritty extra 2-3 yards.
And great with ball security.
Make a huge difference between out of you being in 3rd and 3 or 3rd and 7. Just based upon that effort alone. And while doing that, protecting the football and having ball security. That's the exciting thing about what veterans can bring and energize and reinvigorate this group is just by having that power attacking rushing football that controls the time of possession and keeps their defense fresh.
This time you get Daniel Jones handing off to Devontae Booker and gobbled up in the middle of that line by big old number 99, Leonard Williams, who had a sensational season last year. And David, if it's possible, he actually looks bigger and stronger this summer.
He definitely does. And the transition that making from the Jets, playing that outside 5 technique defensive end to playing the 3 technique scheme in Patrick Graham's system couldn't have fit his body in the scheme perfectly even better. I think the one thing that you continue to see out of him is his leadership, his communication. You see the defensive line working stunts and movements together, and he is going to have a tremendous season, especially with the additional help on the outside.
There's Booker again with an outside running play. And, you know, one of the things that I do think that the Giants are going to have to figure out, and we understand there's no secret, they've got to figure out now if they can maintain that steady rush defense. Blake Martinez calling the signals at inside linebacker. But it's probably, maybe, I don't know, Danny Shelton going to be the starter against the run. My goodness, what a wide body, David.
Oh, I mean, he's one of those guys that Coach Flaherty used to be like, you got to forklift him out of there. You're not getting Danny Shelton on one leg and forklifting him out there. You're just hoping you seal the point of attack and are able to work up to the next level. But that's the one thing when you look at this defensive line and this front, they are run stoppers, and that's going to allow these linebackers to run sideline to sidelines to make play when you can stop the run with your front 4.
Shelton is listed at 6'2", 345, by the way. And I don't know, as an offensive lineman, how do you deal with that?
If there's nothing, there's a trick here. I'm going to give it to you, Paul. When there's nothing to hit, go to the hip. When you're working double teams and that guard or that center have everything eaten up, you've got to go to the center of gravity of the player and start working either lifting or applying pressure to the side to move that defensive tackle in order to get him on one leg and get movement.
There's a lot of center of gravity with Danny Shelton.
Oh, yeah, there definitely is. And when you look at those calves and he gets them stuck in the ground, look out, he isn't moving.
We hope you have enjoyed this inside look at Giants practice. For David Diehl, I'm Paul Dottino. We'll see you next time on the Giants Training Camp Report presented by Investors Bank.